Kasper Junge, AI lead at Dinero. Great that we finally found the time to meet. I've really been looking forward to it.
Me too. Mm-hmm.
So this is a talk about AI.
Yeah.
But AI seen from a more business point of view, or how do we implement AI into our businesses, processes, etc. But before that, could you just talk a little bit about yourself and Dinero?
Yeah. So I'm a lead AI engineer at Dinero, and I've been here for about a year soon, and also have a podcast in Danish called Verbose Podcast, which is a very nerdy engineering podcast with very we're talking language models and AI engineering stuff, also software engineering. And then I'm the co-founder and chairman of the board of an association for AI professionals and data science professionals here in Denmark called the Danish Data Science Community. So so I'm very
busy
engaged.
Man.
Yeah, I'm very engaged in the Danish data science community, basically. Yeah.
And AI as well.
Yeah.
Mm. So with all your expertise, if you just had to answer the simple question, so what is AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I'm a little confused myself. I use the word machine learning and AI depending on who I'm talking to, because I want to make myself I want people to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I use the word AI because that's the word people know.
Yeah.
And a lot more people know because of ChatGPT, basically.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's appropriate to call it machine learning.
Yeah.
But I think the ChatGPT is, and the generative language model, the large language model stuff is what most people associate with AI today.
Yeah.
And also maybe generative AI in general.
Yeah.
These more general models that can generate and solve problems on the fly, basically.
But for someone who doesn't really know large language models, or a business owner who is sitting out there and he's tried or she has tried ChatGPT and found it interesting, but what is it actually, and what can I use it for in my business? If we just had to try to explain that AI thing, how would you put your words on it if we cannot use large language models or?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. Basically, it's artificial language understanding. Okay. I would say I'm working a lot with the language part of it, but there's also this image generation. Many have seen models like DALL-E and Midjourney generate very impressive images. That's also generative AI. So that's a great question. But I see AI as computers have the ability to understand visual and audio, language, text, different modalities. It's called different types of unstructured data. AI gives computers the ability to kind of understand it, and reason is maybe not the right word, because there's many signs that it's not actual reasoning that is going on, but it seems like at least that the computer is able to kind of reason about data types that were previously hard to handle by a computer with traditional software and programming.
So back in the old days, we basically programmed the computers to have a functionality. So if we gave an input A based on our functionality, what we created in the systems, hardcore, you could say, it gave an output.
Yeah.
And now that's changing a little bit, because we're starting to give, with software, our computers the capability to give human capabilities, more or less.
Yeah,
one is seeing, one is hearing, another one is reasoning based off these input, my suggestions, or I think this, we are doing as human beings. So suddenly software is starting to get capabilities of humans.
Yeah, so software is starting to get very good at understanding data types that is unstructured in a traditional software terminology. And that was also possible before. I have worked with AI also before ChatGPT. Back then I worked at a company called Ekstrabladet, which is a Danish news media. There we, for example, worked with classifying articles, news articles, into sentiment. We wanted to know if the kind of like the headline was positive, neutral, or negative, had a negative sentiment. That was like one example of a task we would like to make the computer do, like understand, right? So what we did was that we took a bunch of titles from news articles and we labeled them, manually labeled them, is this positive, negative, or neutral?
Yeah.
And then we trained a neural network to kind of like understand that labelings we did. And then it could kind of like look at new news article titles that it had never seen before and do the same thing. So that was an example of us teaching the machine this one little specific language understanding task, right?
Right.
Which is kind of like different from what traditional software could. That would usually take a long time to do because we had to kind of like get the data, annotate it, like label it, tell when was it positive, negative, or neutral. Then we had to do a lot of data processing and a lot of work to kind of like train this neural network on a GPU, like a special type of computer. It could very well take like 1 to 2 months for an inexperienced ML team to kind of like go through this process.
Right.
And that also means there was a big risk associated to kind of like make software understand language. Nowadays, with the large language models, these neural networks, these language models, have gotten a lot more general. So what would have taken me 1 to 2 months 2 years ago can now be done in 5 minutes, basically, by just writing a prompt and then simply asking the large language model, which is kind of like the main component behind ChatGPT.
Right.
So the cost of making software understand language has just dramatically, it's basically zero now, right? Many people does not look at it that way, but that is actually how it is. And that means if you want to build a new, and it's also a little hard because people are used to thinking. Also here in Dinero, we're making accounting software. If you look at Dinero, it is like a classic piece of software. Everywhere that you put text or language, like text data into the system, it's not meant it's not the idea that the system should understand it. It's the idea that you yourself as a user should read it on some other time to kind of like make sense of what data you've inputted in your system, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at software in general, if you put text into a piece of software, it's usually because you want to send that piece of text to someone else for them to understand it, or put it in a, for example, a to-do list for yourself to understand it at some point. It's rarely for the software itself to actually understand it. And there's a good reason for that, because traditionally it has been very expensive, very risky to kind of like start this process because it's so expensive. But now it's super cheap. So there's kind of like an opportunity to kind of like rethink software, because it has the cost of making software understand language has just dropped to basically zero.
But I guess that also, if you stand there as a company want to start your journey with AI, that cost has also dropped dramatically.
Yeah.
Of course, you need to know and have people that understands how to work with it, but you can actually start to utilize and adhere it much cheaper and faster than you could 2 years ago.
Yeah, basically because you have basic tools like ChatGPT that you can ask questions that you would before ask an expert. These questions, right? Of course, you should also always be very like you shouldn't always just believe what comes out of ChatGPT right away, but it's usually a very high quality answer that it provides.
But I guess today you can also take the engine that's behind ChatGPT with an engine, and then you can combine it with your own setup, and then suddenly you have something that is tailored to your network.
The word that I'm saying, large language models, abbreviated LLMs, is basically the main component behind ChatGPT, and it's actually very easy to understand what kind of building block it is like in software. It is basically kind of like, it's a server somewhere that you send a piece of text to, and then you get some text back. And that the text you get back is impressively clever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
That's the deal, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how are you obtaining all this in Dinero? I guess that's a journey that you have started with Dinero. How to utilize AI, how to take that into the future.
Yeah, so Dinero have been working with the AI for a long time actually, but have, soon, it's 3 years ago, had its kind of like own dedicated AI team.
Right.
And that was before ChatGPT and the whole large language model wave revolution by OpenAI. So back then, it was the idea was more like, which is still relevant today, that you have financial data, and you want to kind of like use AI to understand that, so you can kind of like automatically put it into now it's the words accounted. I guess you say, put it into
okay.
Do accounting on it, automate accounting, right? It's also always hard to the words in English. Used to them in Danish, right? So yeah, so that's basically the deal, and that's because we believe that Dinero is an piece of accounting software for people, self-employed people typically, that want to do it themselves and don't want to hire a bookkeeper to do it. And for them it's very valuable. That's not their heart.
That's not their core business.
No, right?
It's an afterthought. Oh my God!
But they have to do it, right? So,
Absolutely.
and we want to take as much of that workload away from them as possible. And one way we can do that is by automating as much of it as possible. So that's kind of like the origin idea by the AI team in Dinero. The
automation.
Automation. The team has since then been expanded with me, for example. And now there's also things have changed a little with these large language models. First of all, the LLMs. I'm just going to call them LLMs.
Fine.
The things that you send text to and get clever text back, right? We can actually also use them in the backend to kind of like enrich our data to make it better for our classic machine learning models to do a better job.
Right.
Yeah, there may be some information missing from bank transactions, for example. It's a very short text that might not contain all of the information. We can use LLMs to kind of like do research to kind of like get the necessary information for our models to make a good classification and create a voucher on it.
Right.
So we can use this new technology as a as a tool for the old thing, or not the old, but the actual idea with the AI team. But they can do much more than that, and that is I've started to think of it as like front-end AI, basically.
Right.
The part of the AI that the user sees, that is not just magic that happens in the backend and do the things automatically, but actually is interacting with the user. And that is the part that was kind of like absent before ChatGPT, but is now become very widely known.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have a relationship to AI via this interface. And basically what that means to us is that we have a new interface for Dinero. I think of it as like, once we had Dinero on desktop, you can use it via a browser. Then mobile, mobile is the next step, right? Because you also want to be able to do your thing on the mobile when you're on the go. The advantage of that is that you don't have to sit in front of your computer. You can do it in the bus or wherever you are.
Because now we're starting to talk with it instead.
Yeah, and that's what we believe. We actually believe that what people are talking a lot about AI assistants and stuff like that. And what we think what that is going to mean is that in the future in 5 to 10 years, we're going to increasingly use software through language. And not just language, but it could also be like an image, for example. Just we can more like actually tell or show the software something, and then it figures it out. And that has a lot of advantages, because you can, with that, you can expect that you can, for example, first of all, you can use your natural. You don't have to sit, in front of a computer, look into a screen, and type a keyboard, which is very unnatural things to do for human beings. You can actually use your voice more, or your language more. You don't have to know how to use a piece of software. You don't have to be an expert on some area. You can actually just express what you're experiencing in your own words, and then maybe the often what we see in Dinero, we have a support chat. Often what we see is that when users are writing to us, they have a problem. Almost always, there's not enough information in the initial query or the initial message that the user sends. So it could also be the job of the AI to kind of provide questions in order to kind of get the information that they want. And you could just start to use software through language and expect it to do more advanced things. For example, instead of manually typing in data, you could tell the software to do it and then register it automatically in the database. Could also be that we believe that in 5 to 10 years, a new way that is going to emerge of how we use software is more what reminds me of delegating than just automating, right? Yeah. So you would actually be able to delegate tasks, like multi-step complex tasks, to software. And because software suddenly has the ability to understand what you're saying, understand the software, and make a plan, execute on it, correct itself, then you could start to...
So I'm getting my own personal accountant instead of having a tool, actually. So it's a proactive, knows my business, knows what we need to do. So it knows that we are starting now. The year's coming up, we need to end the year with financially. Yeah. It knows everything that we need to do. Perhaps it's telling me that, well, in 2 weeks we need to do X, Y, Z. We're missing this. We need to provide me data with Y. Yeah. So being also a proactive side on me, who perhaps as a single person business don't know.
That is exactly the thing. We are talking about. We want to build a digital CFO, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that knows my business, knows the process that I need to go through, reminds me what we need to do. But does it in the background as well. So basically, now it's done.
We imagine that there should not be a big difference between having an actual CFO in your company, if you could afford it. Yeah. As self-employed, you often can't. Yeah. There shouldn't be in the experience of it. There shouldn't be a big difference between it. Other than it would also work for you at night, and do whatever you tell it to, and probably also be good at a lot of other stuff, right? But let me just be clear: we're not there yet. No, but we can see we're starting to get the tools, and we can see a way there, right? And it's also because back in the days we had to make these specific models to solve specific tasks, which were very a long process. Now we first of all don't have to do that. It takes 5 minutes to write a prompt, and then you're started, right? Yeah. Very low risk of getting started with it, but because it's so easy, the system can also understand stuff on the fly, right? It can kind of understand. It doesn't have to be decided beforehand what the system is about. It's supposed to kind of what types of language problems it's supposed to understand. It could do it on the fly, right? And that's also another advantage that makes it very dynamic. And also, back in the days when I worked with AI before LLMs, the output of a neural network language model would be like a vector, like a list of numbers, which meant something, usually a probability distribution over some categories that you wanted to classify, for example. Super nerdy, right? Yeah. But nowadays, the output is actually, you put some text in, and the output is some text, right? For you. So it's human readable. It's actually much more accessible to way more people, and it has also this dynamic nature to it. So you can actually, solve things on the fly, right? And it can actually express LLM language models can now also express the will to do things, to take action, read, search the web, query the database.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if a business person is listening to this who needs to put it a part of their strategy, what would be your advice? How to get started with all this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Mid-sized company. I've not touched it yet.
I think it's interesting. We have like a chat-based support, and that I've come to see that as our language interface to Dinero. So we're actually having this language interface already, because what we sell is expertise, right? Encoded in software, right? So one thing I could say is that if your business is providing some sort of expertise to some customers, something is going to happen, I would say. It's not entirely clear what, right? But it also depends if you're talking about, the very long term or like 5 to 10 years, or just
it could also be now within the next year. So and how to grasp it, how to take a hold of it.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about software companies because that's what I do. So I'm thinking a lot in terms of building software products. And in terms of that, I would start to see my software in a new way, because with the knowledge that this has become way more accessible than it was before, and people who's not developers can actually also come up with ideas for what types of problems could be solved in that some specific software product, right? Because they can actually sit and do it themselves, basically. Then there's the thing of deploying it and stuff like that, but so that could you leave up to some technical people, but there will probably also come some software to, like some no-code software to do that for you, right?
But I guess in the question of should they start to focus on it or not, regardless, it's at least you should start to have some kind of strategy. Whether it's we understand it, it's not for us. That's one check mark.
Yeah.
But definitely businesses today around Scandinavia, I think, if I understand you correctly, is that they should, wouldn't say wake up, but at least they should understand it and decide on whether it's something for them or not. So they have a conscious choice because it's going so fast.
Yeah. In my experience, many people are concerned about, should we make our employees use AI technology, right? And I don't have a clear answer for that, because there's so many types of businesses. But I as a programmer has like a lot of use for it, right? It's really, I think maybe a program is one of the best use cases for AI and ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, if you're not a programmer, that might not be super clear for you how powerful it actually is. But
no.
So, but basically, if everywhere where I've been, the strategy have been to kind of like buy access to, like, teach people what this is, show them, and the ones who are kind of like interested, provide them access to the tools. And then look out for software products that is solving problems in your area, because there should be a lot of innovation coming soon in a lot of software products that can solve problems. Yeah.
I'm talking about development and outlook. What's your outlook? What if you look 2, 5, X years ahead? How do you see this evolve? What's your predictions?
I think a lot about this language interface, that, in the same way that a lot of companies suddenly they needed an app for mobile phones, because that was a new platform that many people were starting to using suddenly, and users were kind of like expecting of their software apps that they should be able to be used on their mobile phone, and they should not look super cluttery.
No.
I expect the same thing to happen with the language. I don't know if language is the right word, because I also imagine that it's going to be able to see data, like visual data, right? Just visual language interface. People are going to expect the better it's going to be, and the more examples of good solutions where they also have the opportunity to kind of like, and when people start to see the benefits of this new interface, they're going to expect that they can also use their software, and also they can, there may be a lot of new products they can start using and that provide values to them. Yeah.
What's the flip side of the coin? What's the risks?
Yeah, the
With every
risk.
new technology comes, and I think this is a great power that comes great responsibilities, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you see?
That's a great question. When building these systems, it also involves autonomy, and that can be very scary for a lot of people, both for people who are afraid of this technology, but also for like us as a software provider to just let this thing loose, right?
Yeah.
And it does things autonomously, and then the harm it can do is kind of like limited by what tools you give it access to. You could, like right now on my computer, I could give an AI access to the terminal where it can execute commands, right? And if I run Linux or some open source operating system, it would be able to kind of like delete the operating system with one command, right?
Yeah.
If it decides to.
If it decides to, yeah.
That's so. The increasingly powerful tools you give the AI access to, you can also like expect some glitch to happen, and then it would kind of like could do harm, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also the it seems like you could get way more with this technology because it is able to understand language like on the fly, and this general. You can also get very intimate to users. You can really create a good at-scale understanding of individual users. Like make an AI actually, okay, look at this account, try to make sense of it, and take very like detailed decisions on very like specific things about specific users. I imagine like, and as it gets cheaper, using this technology. It scales better and better, and I imagine that could also be used for some some not that very good things, right? Yeah.
Fair enough.
That could be some of my concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what would your advice be to business owners or AI leads that has to start all this? What would your advice be, if any?
Yeah, so my advice would be to maybe it depends, there's a lot of different situations. Me, myself, I'm very concerned about software product development and, ensuring that we're doing the right things there. But, a lot of people are also concerned with their, like, what tools should I provide for my employees and stuff like that. But either way, I would kind of like make sure that I kind of like do research and kind of like stay on top of what, even though that can be hard in itself, to kind of like stay up to date about what is happening in the AI space, and maybe also specifically in your specific area. I'm very fascinated about this idea in my domain, in the software product domain, that one of the things that it means is that developing language understanding, especially in software, has just gotten dramatically cheaper, and that creates a lot of opportunity to just look at the functionality of your app or whatever you're building differently. Basically.
So now it's actually becoming accessible. So now people should really start to look at it because it's not so costful anymore.
Yeah, and then I would. Some people may also be like very worried about, what about my whole company if I'm a consultant business with a lot of programmers, for example. These models an AI is really good at programming, right? Yeah. So many could maybe be nervous. What about their job in the future, right? And I would definitely pay attention to that because what we are building at Dinero is accounting software now, but what we aim to build in the future and what we are working towards is already we're building a replacement for a bookkeeper, for example, right?
Yeah.
But there's, it's still not 100% sufficient. And I imagine that we are only getting better at that as time goes, and I imagine that many other companies, software products, will become better at that as time goes, right? So me as myself as a programmer, I'm also kind of like staying up to date with what is happening, because it may be able to inform me about what decisions to make in the future, right?
Yeah. So actually, if you take it into, it can improve you and make you better, or you could see it as an enemy. So either if you don't know about it and don't use it, people that do will get ahead of you much faster.
Yeah.
But you can actually also see it as something that can enrich you as a person.
Maybe we'll see in the future that experts, because I think a lot of expertise and knowledge workers, they are very kind of like exposed to this technology. Maybe people are going to, instead of viewing themselves as an individual contributor, they should maybe in the future they could see themselves more as leaders of AI agents that can kind of like, so you can delegate stuff to your AI engines, and I don't know.
Interesting.
That may be right, but nobody knows, and not even me, even though I know a lot about it, I can't predict the future, right? So, but I can just see that a lot of things is going to. I see a lot more things, is more possible now, because it's quicker and cheaper to both use and develop with this technology. Yeah.
So stay tuned is your biggest advice, I guess.
A little bit of a fluffy advice, but
no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
But take it seriously, I would 100%.
Yeah, take it seriously and be interested.
Yeah.
Kasper, thank you so much for taking your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Always.